let's talk about pushing the boundaries in photography and how that might make you a better photographer. On a recent trip to Paris, I gave myself a simple challenge. Can I shoot the streets of Paris with the 100 to 400 Sony G Master? Now, why did I give myself such a challenge? Well, I think Paris is the perfect place for the 100 to 400. It has everything. It's got the narrow streets with lots of people. It's got the expansive views from the Sacré-Cœur. It even has a retired French football player who does keepy-uppies on the balcony at the Sacré-Cœur. That guy has been there for over a decade and is fantastic. It's got lots of architecture. It's got the Louvre. It's got the Arc de Triomphe. It's got Sacré-Cœur. It's also got this big pointy thing that people go and see all the time. So yeah, Paris has everything covered. And all of this is actually very important when you're setting yourself achievable challenges. I see a lot of people setting impossible challenges when they're doing photography, and that's the last thing you want to do, because that's going to take the fun out of photography. You're going to feel defeated, and that's just not good, because you want to feel creative and want to feel optimistic when you're going out there and taking photos. So don't do that, and set yourself achievable challenges. The one thing that I was worried about when I decided to take this lens to Paris was that it's going to give me blurry videos or blurry photos or shaky videos, because it's not a 2.8. It's an f4 to 5.6 with a variable aperture depending on if you're 100 or 400 millimeters. But that didn't happen because this also has optical image stabilization. So when you combine the image stabilization on this lens with the camera, you know, they combine pretty well, and the images turn out to be pretty sharp and the videos turn out to be pretty non-shaky as long as you're standing still. Remember, I didn't take a tripod with me. I was just holding this with the camera. So that was pretty good. And of course, I didn't take my shutter speed below 1/250th. I just shot the ISO up. And even with that, the images at night look pretty good and sharp to me. The compression on this lens is also something that was very surprising to see. I love my 85 and the compression I get with it, but when you take it up a notch with 100 to 400, the compression is just fantastic. It lets me focus in on my subject, and just the rest of it just doesn't matter. You know, you get your focus in. I think it's like being on the tube and putting noise cancelling headphones on, right? As soon as you put those on, the rest of the crowd and the tube, the noisy tube, just goes away, and you're there with your music. That's how I feel about the compression on the 100 to 400. So what are my key learnings and takeaways from using this lens and this lens alone in Paris? Remember, this is not a street photography lens. You know, this is a sports, wildlife, landscape lens first. So I was putting this lens, as well as myself, outside of our comfort zones because, hey, doing telephoto 400mm street photography isn't something that I've done. So yes, we were both outside of our comfort zone. But the first thing that I want to talk about, the key learning, was being conscious about how big this lens is. Especially if you're in a narrow street, in a corridor. This is a big lens, and you're likely to block people. Imagine putting that up. In Paris, people are not going to give a damn about your lens. They just want to get from place A to B, and they're going to knock your lens. So be hyper aware of your surroundings, especially if you're in narrow corridors or narrow streets. This is a big lens. And whilst you're doing photography in those narrow corridors, I'd recommend you take photos down the line and never across. Because this is quite a long length, even at the 100mm to 400, you're unlikely to get the full context of the image that you want to try and show your audience, right? Whereas if you go down the line, you're going to get the beautiful compression and you're going to get to focus in on your subject, plus show some of the context, giving you fantastic images at the longer length. And finally, you have to think before you walk. It's, I think, slightly the opposite to what it would be with a prime lens. On street photography, I generally just walk to my subject, have a look, build a context, wait, patient, take a photo, fantastic. I can't do that with the 100 to 400. Let me give you an example. I wanted to take a photo of the Army Museum, and I realized quite quickly that I had actually gotten a bit too close to the museum, and I'm not going to be able to take the full photo that I wanted, top to bottom, in its entirety, and show you the full museum in its glory. So I had to change my plan and do some other photos that you can see right now. But that wasn't my plan. My plan was to do a full photo. And I was a bit lazy to not walk back. And sure, you can call me lazy, but I'd just done 20,000 steps with a very heavy lens in my hand. And I just didn't want to do that. So what I'm trying to say is you've got to do a little bit more thinking around your shots before walking. Because if you end up a bit too close, you're going to have to do some more exercise. But if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, is to experiment. Try and push the boundaries of yourself and your equipment. Try and use this in ways you've never done before. Because if you do that, you're going to learn a lot about your equipment, you're going to learn about yourself and your photography style as well. So all in all, it's a fantastic way to experiment and learn. I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you have, then leave a comment down below with times where you've experimented or pushed the boundary. I'd love to hear from you. That's all from me. I'm Sohail, and I'll see you in the next one.